Okay, so that's us at 10 now. So there's just people still coming in. So I'll just keep letting them in, but I'll just get started off there. So yeah, so thank you very much for joining us this morning for our food and drink technology event. So it's really nice to see you all this morning, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. So basically just a couple of notes before we get started. The session is being recorded, just so that you're aware. We will be sending a copy of the recording out. So if there's anybody that's missed it or you want to catch up later, you can do. On top of that, you will notice that you're on mute at the moment, any attendees, and we do encourage you to use the chat functionality if there's any questions that you might have, and we'll do our best to answer them throughout the duration of the session. So that's pretty much all the notes kind of covered for me. So I'm going to pass on to Joe Pasiti from Seed Scotland, who will be leading the event this morning. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, Zupash. Good morning, everyone. I've heard of Teams, someone trying to call me on another line at the same time, so I've just killed that. Good morning, everyone. I'll start again. It's my pleasure to chair this session, which is really, as you all know, focused on the food and drink sector. And I guess the kind of main theme here is about the kind of automation and productivity gain. So we have a illustrious panel. We have Mark Hilson, who's head of IT and business systems at White & Mackay. Jamie, is Jamie on? And
yep, Jamie should be.
Yep, Jamie Grant morning, Jamie, digital workplace team at Edrington. Graham McLean, the SharePoint practice lead for Bridgeall, and Brian Snedden, who's operations director at Elite Controls. Unfortunately, we did have Malcolm Smith from Tenants registered to be one of the panel, but something has come up and he can't make it. So we will power on through without him. The agenda there is really, we're going to do a couple of brief introductions. The team at Bridgeall and at Elite will give us some kind of formal presentations, a little bit about the technology, and the panel, I think, will come in with some very, very insightful, if you like, views from their side as the client and what they're trying to do. So I'll try and keep them in order, but we do really encourage the chat room. So Graham, I think you've got slides. Could you maybe bring up the next slide, please? So shamelessly plugging Seed, but I think it makes sense. And for those that don't know, Seed is a membership body. It's peer-to-peer best practice sharing. We're not a kind of lobbying organisation focusing very much on engineering, manufacturing and technology. And it's about sharing that best practice, that insight, that knowledge, and Bridgeall and Smart Crowds subset of Bridgeall and Elite Controls are members of Seed. So it's great that we are working with members, getting an insight into what they're doing and how they can help shape, if you like, advancement in the kind of manufacturing sector. So you know, encourage people to look at the website and come along. You will recognise many of these faces again when you pop on to some of the other events. Graham, next slide, please. And I'm going to keep this short. This is really just a slide to talk about something that we do very specifically, which is the cluster builder. There's a programme funded through Scottish Enterprise and Highlands and Islands Enterprise with Scottish Government money, primarily to help SMEs, but multinationals can participate as well in terms of setting challenges. And there's a lot of support around Scotland. Over 20 odd million pounds worth has been put in to set up 12 centres that cover everything from construction, manufacture, energy, hydrogen, power, additive, and robotics, etc., etc. So if people are looking for support and some advice, then if they want to come in through ourselves, we can direct them to the centres, and of course there's the National Manufacturing Institute. So that's it. I'm not going to do any more than that. What I'm going to do is really invite Graham to kind of come forward with the first presentation. So Graham, if you do that. But I think really it's a case of, if you remember the invite that went out, what we're really looking at here is how we might be able to kind of look at ways that automation may actually help us reach those levels of productivity. So looking forward to the insight from Graham. Over to you.
Thanks, Joe. So I'm, as Joe already mentioned, I'm Graham McLean, head of the SharePoint and Microsoft 365 practice for Bridgeall. I've just got short presentation this morning, bit of an overview as to some of the work that we've done with customers and some of the use cases that we've got that basically really help that kind of productivity and that automation story within the industry. So first of all, just a quick kind of introduction as to who we are. We're a 9 times Microsoft Gold partner. We work across the full Microsoft stack, everything from Azure, Microsoft 365, Teams, SharePoint, Power Apps, everything in between. We're also a CSP Direct Tier 1 license provider, so it allows us to get licenses for everything from Azure consumption across to Microsoft 365 licenses as well, to deliver that all as part of a project package. And we're also ISO 9001 and 27001 and Cyber Essentials certified as well. So, first of all, why bother with automation? Why do we need to start having a look at automation? So, we've got some points there around the kind of turnaround times, low productivity, human error. It's all the kind of same story that that we've heard before. There's been quite a lot of studies. So 7 in 10 workers feel they're better equipped to hit targets if they have clear processes, in terms of managing their workload. Quite a lot of the customers we speak to, they're kind of bogged down with manual processes, and it's not a symptom of them being, slow in any way. It's a symptom of them, having grown, and these processes just having grown and never really been reviewed as, are we doing the right thing? Is there any technology we can take advantage of? So they tend to stick with these manual processes. The problem we've got with that is obviously human error is between about 18% and 40%. So you then have processes with humans involved, and that has to then go back and has to get redone, or the later the error gets caught, the more expensive it is in terms of the process as well. And then the last thing, just kind of disconnected, outdated IT systems, systems that don't talk to each other. So you're having to put kind of double key, or in some cases triple key. They could be costing you kind of 20% of the overall value of the system, according to some studies as well. So how can we help? So we've got the Microsoft Power Platform is Microsoft's kind of combined term for a collection of technologies that help in the automation space. So from left to right there, we've got Power BI, the kind of business analytics and reporting platform. We've got Power Apps, which is a kind of low-code / no-code development platform. And then we've got Power Automate, which is an enterprise-grade workflow solution. And then the last one, Power Virtual Agents, which is really these kind of chatbots, kind of intelligent agents that you see either hosted on a website or internal to the organisation, to be doing things like Q&A type sessions or FAQs or whatever. So, and then along the bottom there, we've got a collection of services, that work with this platform. So some of the web APIs for connecting to separate systems. There's a whole bunch of data connectors that come out of the box that connect to third-party systems or other Microsoft systems. There's the AI Builder, which helps you do things like form-based processing and document understanding, or understanding images and things like that. So, good example there has been things like car registration numbers, for example, being able to take photos and then identify car registration numbers and get them processed into the system. And finally, Dataverse, which really kind of underpins all the kind of Power Apps, Power Automate aspect of it, where if you're building an application, that's the kind of enterprise grade database storage for all the data in the Power Apps. And again, it has all its own kind of version control, its auditing, and its own kind of ingestion methods as well, and its own reporting layer as well. Okay, so starting with Power BI then, just looking at Power BI, obviously you can build powerful kind of drag and drop reports and dashboards, and also combine multiple data sources into one data model. So it allows you to see the whole kind of picture of the business across the entire organisation. And on the left there, it's useful for that kind of monthly targets, that kind of monthly kind of SLA type idea. And quite often what we're seeing is customers will build like a Power App or a Power Platform type solution, and then it will have an associated Power BI layer with it as well. And the Power BI layer may be reporting into Power Platform, maybe reporting into the data that's driven in there. But it may also be picking up data from other places. So that could be, other internal systems, or, obviously Elite are going to go on to talk about their control systems. There's the opportunity to kind of work with those control systems and a Power Platform type system to, to kind of deliver a report that goes across the full spectrum of the kind of manufacturing suite. Okay, and then next up is robotic process automation. So again, there's part of the Power Platform, which now has an RPA offering. So, really using software to perform tasks that are normally carried out by humans. So these are kind of repetitive type tasks that can really be automated by the robotic process automation. So in terms of, instead of a person, carrying out an entry into an ERP system, for example, the bot, if you like, the RPA bot can be doing this, can be carrying this out for you. So it allows you to automate those tasks and really get those operational and cost efficiencies. And where we're seeing that being used is quite often the kind of integration with legacy systems. So if you have an ERP system or another line of business system, which maybe doesn't have those kind of more modern APIs and things like that to integrate with in terms of a system can be built which can output the data, and then the RPA solution can pick up on that and put the data in as though a human was putting the data into the system. So it lets us build that kind of end-to-end system, even though you might not have the modern APIs. And the other good thing, obviously, is it's reducing the manual errors. If you're taking a process and you're kind of automating that process, and then you're putting the data into the system, then you're reducing the manual errors that you would have from somebody manually putting this into the system, or having to double key between the two systems as well. We also have an upcoming event around automation, so you can find out more on Eventbrite on the Bridgeall page about that. So Pat should probably tell you a bit more about that later on as well. So if you're interested in finding out a bit more about the automation and RPA and how that can help you, then suggest you have a wee look at that event, sign up for that. Okay, just moving on to some of the kind of typical use cases that we've seen in the Power Platform, and just process automation and things like that, particularly around the industries that we're talking about today. So in the health and safety space, we've seen things like recording of accidents and incidents, near misses. So doing that in kind of real time with users with their phone or their tablet, they're able to take photos of what's happened, photos of the situation, describe the situation a bit better, see the progress of cases. So once they put a case in, they can see whereabouts in the process it is and what's happening with it. And the other thing is the kind of creation and the publication of risk assessments. So we did a bit of work with a housing association, Link Housing Association, around the creation and the publication of risk assessments. And I'll talk about that in a wee minute in more detail. In terms of the inventory management, we've seen applications such as the kind of creation of daily or weekly kind of check-in and out processes for assets. So we did a wee bit of work with ScotRail, for example, building in these kind of check-in sheets for trains coming into the depot, being checked from a health and safety point of view, going through a review and approval process with escalation built in terms of the SLAs and kind of custom business rules to flag if anything was wrong to certain people. And then brewing processes, so we've done a bit of work kind of with the monitoring and the measurement of kind of key aspects of the brewing and the distillation process. So, you know, helping to kind of capture all that data through the process and then identify, you know, recurring issues or any trends and help kind of monitor and report that back. And also managing kind of back office processes, so things like, you know, new labeling, new product lines, integration with ERP type systems, and some customer onboarding processes as well, which you'll see again in more detail in a minute. And then lastly, the workshop inspection process. So, you know, just managing the kind of workshop aspect of these processes end to end. So reporting on the kind of average time for, you know, workshop inspections from the start of the process right through to the end, so that back office can tell the customer where their, you know, particular inspection is in the process, and they can measure against KPIs on that. You can also generate real-time responses from technicians in terms of being able to get pictures, descriptions, measurements and things while the person has that bit of equipment right in front of them. And what we're seeing is customers then kind of, you know, take that information and those pictures and pull that into reports that are automatically generated by the system, so that the customer has a kind of visual of, you know, here was the bit of equipment, here was the measurement, this is what it looks like, this is what a normal one should look like. So they're starting to get kind of quite powerful reports and quite powerful metrics out of that as well. Okay, just moving on to a couple of case studies. So we recently did an onboarding solution using Power Platform and some of the Microsoft stack for both tenants and for Wade Mackay actually. You know, previously that was a kind of manual process with Excel sheets or Word documents just being passed backwards and forwards between the various different departments. We kind of streamlined that, and now the customer can fill in their own information using an online portal. The case gets tracked from the beginning to the end, and there's kind of KPIs at each stage to measure you know, how long it's taking between each of the stages. And the other thing is that multiple tasks can now be carried out by different departments at the same time. So whereas that Excel spreadsheet or Word document had to be passed, you know, around the departments, and the department couldn't do anything until the previous task had been done, now it's easier to just kind of streamline all those tasks, and they can all be done in parallel, reducing the time to onboard new customers. And there was also integration at the end with the ERP solution to take that right into tenant's ERP system and onboard a new customer. Okay, and then Link, so a health and safety application that I'd mentioned earlier. So Link needs to create risk assessments for each kind of location, building or site or event. And what they were doing is, again, they were doing this manually. They were having multiple meetings to kind of generate these risk assessments, and that was taking lots of manual effort to create. So our solution allows creation of risk assessments through basically selecting blocks of kind of static text. So quite a lot of these risks and things, you know, just come up again. So they're able to kind of select from the option, that's the risk that I want, that's what I want to say, or be able to put some free text in there. From there, that kind of draft risk assessment goes through a workflow and gets approved by the people who would have sat, you know, manually in different places at different times. It goes to them automatically to be reviewed. That obviously goes backwards and forwards through the stages of being changed until eventually that gets approved. And once that gets approved, we generate an actual risk assessment document, which is then put onto SharePoint for everyone in Link to see, and that's the kind of major version, that's the published version. And then we've got some business rules in there that say, you know, this should be reviewed every kind of year or 2 years, and that will get flagged to management for them to have a look at and review as well. Okay, so that's a kind of brief overview of you know, quite a lot of the work that we're doing in the automation space and some of the common kind of use cases that we'll see. I'm going to hand over now to Brian at Elite, who's going to take you through the kind of power of the remote support aspect of their business.
Graham, I was going to say, I was going to maybe ask Mark and Jamie just for a comment. That's all right.
Sure.
Mark and Jamie, I'm just wondering what your experience is when you migrate to a new automated system. When do you switch off the old paper-based system? What level of confidence? I'm sure people in the audience will be used to running parallel systems.
I'm happy to take that first, yeah. Yeah, well, in respect to the onboarding, Joe, right now we switched off the old system immediately. In effect, the minute it went live, we stopped accepting the old Excel spreadsheet pass the parcel via email type of situation. Obviously, we had to process the ones that were in the mix, as it were. But no, we basically switched it on and says, right, okay, go for it. You know, I suppose the main point to take from that is not a point about the technology, it's about processes and testing internally. You know, we probably didn't get a mass testing of the solution before it went live. Therefore, what we found when it went live is that we started to find issues. So yeah, it was that was down to us, but it was not down to the technology.
Yeah, I think from Edmonton's point of view, we've got a recent example where we are about to launch an inspections app using Power Apps and Power Automate to inspect bottles coming off the line that have slight defects. So we've got a paper-based solution that goes in place at the moment. And we are obviously going through a robust testing process prior to going live, but our intention is to probably run them in parallel, just for a period of a week to 10 days, just to make sure that we've got that transition, and that transition is as smooth as we can make it from the existing paper-based into the digital system. So that's typically how we would operate. But I echo what Mark was saying there, and really kind of depends on the application or the system that you're implementing, and also your user base as well.
Brilliant, thank you for those comments. That just shows maybe that you had confidence in the people providing you the system, so that's great. Brian, I think now we're going to hand over to you and get the Elite side of things, and then we'll do the same. We'll then open into a more general panel and Q&A. So please make sure you put your questions into the chat room so that we can specifically answer. Brian, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. I think Graham's going to be my wingman on slides, so I'll give you a nod when I need you. Hopefully this brief, you'll be glad to know, brief presentation will give you a bit of an insight into how remote support works and the capabilities, how they've evolved and developed in recent years, and they've been quantum leap forward in terms of what we're able to do now. It's probably first important to mention that remote support is more than just a reactive 24/7 breakdown service. And hopefully the presentation I'm about to do will show the real power when we use that technique with some of the other techniques we have. What Elite do internally is we simulate all our projects on a PC-based simulation system, so we can actually run the project in real time in our office before we go to site. And by linking that to remote support, it suddenly stops becoming just a 24/7 reactive service that we offer. It becomes a fully comprehensive support service for major projects as well, and I'll show you a couple of examples of that. But before we go on to speak about the main topic, I thought I'd put a slide up just showing the brief history of Elite, detailing some of the main milestones and partnerships that we've established over the years. As you can see, we've been around for some time now, best part of 30 years. Next year will be 30 years, so we've seen a lot of progress and developments in the OT world. So hopefully we're well qualified to discuss how this particular part of our industry has evolved. I do draw your attention to one part on that slide at the bottom there. We're very proud of our friends Seed who are present today. We managed to win a national award last year for resilience, cyber resilience. So hopefully that shows we're doing something right. And of course, remote support is very much cyber suspect in terms of people breaking into your system and things like that. So moving on to the subject of remote support itself, Graham, where were we? Where do we come from? So in the past, there was a real reluctance to accept the technology and to accept the concept of remote support for sites. So it was always perceived that it would only be remote and hard to reach locations that were interested, as the name suggests, remote support. So far-flung places were interested in it, and people in perhaps the central belt of Scotland weren't, because we're based there. But that's not the case now, as I'll show you hopefully. It was very, very cost prohibitive in the early days. And when I'm saying early days, I'm only talking 10 years ago. It's not that long ago. Even 5-6 years ago, some of the hardware they had to buy to get the amount of data through was quite expensive, ridiculously expensive, if I'm being honest. But so it was very cost prohibitive, and that's another factor. Most of the problems came from obsolete obsolete equipment, on sites where it wasn't compatible. There was no direct link to the OT level devices, PLCs, HMIs, any equipment like that. You could usually hook into some of them, but not all of them. So clients were not going to spend a lot of money to get the suitable hardware to get part of their plant supported. They needed the whole plant supported. So that was a real negative as well. And security is always a major concern. Ironically, 10 years ago, security wasn't as big a factor because we're in different times this stage in the world, but it was still a major concern that if you tell a client we have a window into your operation and we can make changes, we can watch what you're doing, there's always a lot of trepidation in terms of signing up for that. So, and also someone hacking in there and all that sort of stuff. So obviously a lot of concerns in that area. One of the biggest factors was probably there was no budget allocated. It was seen as a luxury. It was a nice to have, and it was one or two of our clients who would adopt this. And really, even then, it was very restricted in terms of what we could do, how we could do it. Things have moved on quite significantly since then. Graham, next slide, please. So where are we now? I'm glad to say technology has evolved very quickly. It's become much more acceptable, and probably all the open connectivity that's available, all the OPC type connections that are available now has helped that immensely. The cost has dropped dramatically, really dramatically over the last 5 years in particular. We can now install a piece of hardware, as I mentioned there, about £500, that gives you military grade encryption security. So that is as high as you can possibly get. Use a technology called tunnel technology, and as the name suggests, it's a tunnel. It's a very secure tunnel for uploading and downloading and cross transference of information. So it is as high quality as you can get. And we can now put a fully certified security system in place. 10 years ago, it was very difficult to do that without spending a really exorbitant amount of money. The link to OT devices is much, much better than it was. Obviously, new PLCs, new HMIs, it's fairly simple to connect those things. But as I mentioned on my previous slide, some of the older equipment is still out there. But we can now buy very small 22mm wide DIN rail mountable connection devices straight into these old PLCs and HMIs while they are still being at the right security level. So things have changed quite considerably, and it's now considered as a necessity. The amount of data we can transfer back and forward and what we can do when we have remote support access is huge. Things have changed, and hopefully the two examples I'll show you later in the slides will let you see that. Well, ironically, the pandemic has accelerated the need for remote support. I mean, logistically, it was difficult to get a support engineer to get on site, just getting masks on and gelled up and all that sort of stuff. A lot of the essential industries that we deal with, people like Ineos down in Grangemouth, we simply couldn't get on site. So remote support is absolutely crucial to help keep the plant running. And I think the pandemic has actually increased the awareness of remote support. We've seen an increase in the amount of clients who have adopted this. We have something like between 70 and 80 sites that we support remotely, or most of them, remotely, and that's increasing as we go. We always make sure the client has the option of keeping control of site access. It's still a concern that we have a window into their operations. And a simple hardware key switch would do that. And a few clients have adopted that. So they can basically have a key switch in the control room or the panel and give us access when we need it, and then switch it off when so it is totally secure. Then never mind tunnel technology, that completely breaks the circuit, which is great. The big advantage, of course, of remote support is, from a 24/7 point of view, is the response time. So typically with remote connection support, within an hour, we have got connection. We have usually got, I'd say, in the vast amount of call-outs we've got the plant back up and running, the fault found. So within an hour is fairly impressive. Typically, we would have guaranteed a 4-hour response for sites, anywhere in the central belt, and that was the engineer getting the call, having to go to the office, pick up the relevant equipment for whatever the call out was for, whether it be a drive or an HMI or PLC, and then get to site. But having those tools available remotely means that there's no need for that now, and we can get there much quicker. Obviously means less visits to site, which is good for the client, it's good for us. We can enhance that further by issuing VR headsets to clients. So in some places like oil and gas platforms, for instance, very crucial, very remote, very hard to get to. And sometimes there's not even a bed that the engineers can get to site. So it's very, very difficult. So we can issue a VR headset so we can not only remotely link in and look at their network, look at their system, look at the machine, we can physically see it as well. And they become our eyes and ears. So things are progressing quite fast and quite well, and every time, every stage, it's enhancing the level of support we can provide. Centralized support for clients as possible. What I mean by that is it's a bit similar to you would have with a burglar alarm, for instance. If your burglar alarm goes off, it automatically rings a bell, it automatically sends a message to the police or to the burglar alarm company informing them something's happened. We can have that for an automation alarm. We could have it for any part of a plant. And we can enhance that further by having an early warning support system as well. So we can monitor things like temperature in crucial motors for a process, or levels in a tank, for instance, and say in an hour's time we can contact the client and say in an hour's time your tank's going to overfill, or your motor's going to overheat, or it's going to overcurrent, or whatever. So we can really take the remote support to a much higher level now. Obviously that's a continuous link that we have to the client for that, and you wouldn't have a switch for switching things off there, but it's up to the client what they want to do, but we always give them the option to isolate as well. Graham? So I've put some typical examples of, as I say, we've got 70 to 80 sites that we cover. These are some recent examples, some of them purely only 24/7. Edrington, we support them both in their bottling facility in Glasgow and then their distilleries up north, Craigellachie, Highland Park. And that's mostly 24/7. We're looking at the processes, which can be quite complex, getting them back up and running as and when required. And Diageo is very similar. They tend to have, at Cameron Bridge in particular, 120 million litres a year they put through that plant. So it's the biggest plant they have. I think I'm right in saying it's probably the biggest distillery in Europe. And they have a real need for prompt support. They really need someone on the case right away. What we support there is their grain intake part of the plant. And obviously that's crucial to them because, no pun intended, but it's a bottleneck there. There's nothing going to go out the plant if the grain doesn't go in. So it's crucial to the whole site. And that, again, that's 24/7. Frankie is an interesting one. I thought I'd put that one in there because that actually happened during the pandemic. We did an original installation for Frankie about 3 years ago. And it was enhanced last year during the pandemic, and they've increased the capacity of the plant. Sorry, Frankie, if you don't know, are sink manufacturers. They make kitchen sinks, and the plant is in Slovakia. But what we did was we increased the capacity of the plant by 50%. None of the elite engineers visited site during that expansion. We were able to remotely talk through their technicians, help them do the commissioning, training, bug finding, a normal sort of commissioning tasks, if you like, at that stage of the project, and we managed to do that all remotely from our base in Scotland, which was quite a feat. It shows you the power of the product. The other two jobs, I've got individual slides on those because they're fairly typical of the type of stuff we would do. One's in particular quite a big one, Graham. This is for our friends at Technip. So this was for the world's largest pipe-lay vessel. It was based in the Gulf of Mexico. To be honest, could have been based anywhere. What we done there was quite extensive in terms of the size of the installation and the amount of work we did. Vast majority of this was done remotely. On this instance, we actually had to send an engineer on the ship because there was so many facets and so many parts of this project. So we installed new server hardware, we installed a new network for the ship, never run the cables, but we installed and commissioned that part of it. We upgraded the existing SCADA to the latest revision, and that in itself is not a small job, and to be able to do that remotely is phenomenal. We changed the topology on the ship, so instead of having thick clients, so if I'm talking knowledge that people, terminology that people understand here, we installed 16 thin clients, which gives them much more access for maintenance themselves, etc. So it's a completely new topology that we installed, and all of this was commissioned remotely, other than, as I say, having one engineer there who needed to be the eyes and ears and had to physically do certain tasks when he was there. But it greatly reduced the amount of cost to the client. It meant that the ship could continue operating during that phase as well. And these ships are £100,000 a day to rent, so it's very expensive for the client if it's not running and it's not working. So again, having the remote support capabilities that we have and the power of the simulation system behind it, we were able to allow the ship to continue running while we updated the stroke system. Quite powerful. And laterally, we provide 24/7 support for them again. Graham? Another typical one, this is over in Burhaven in Islay, far top corner of Islay. So it probably does fall into the category of remote support in terms of being a remote location. Again, difficult to get to. You've got to get a boat or a flight, engineers away for a day or two at a time. It's quite inconvenient. So initially we looked after the day-to-day support for the client's control system. We were then asked to do an obsolescence upgrade to an existing PLC that they had on site. We were able to commission that system. We were able to interrogate that system. We monitor all their alarms. We can do all that remotely from our base in Livingston. This is one of the clients who gives us controlled access as and when we require it, which is quite important for them. And one of the aspects I thought I'd just highlight is twice a year we had to go out to site in Burhaven and over to Islay and physically go up there to download PLC software functions. They have an effluent system that has to have new parameters set in twice a year. And that meant a trip for 2 or 3 days for an engineer to go over there, download it, test it, check it, and then come all the way back. We now do that all remotely. So the client, it's done in a few hours via the remote connection. The client's absolutely delighted with that. So that's it. I'm trying to give a flavour here for the power of this support capability when it's linked to our simulation. Well, I think that's me. I think that's probably the last one. Yes, so hopefully I've given you a flavour of that and you get an idea of how things have progressed a little bit. It's a little bit of a potted history. If anyone wants to know a little bit more how we do it, then please by all means give me a shout and I'll be gladly expand on it.
Sorry, I hope you can hear me okay. So there's a couple of questions actually in the chat that I hope you can answer. So the first one's Gary Collins. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you now.
A bit of feedback. So it's from Gary Collins. He says, could Brian talk about the VR headsets and what technology Elite are using?
Yeah, it's been fairly new. It's been in the last month or so that we started progressing this. It's for TechNip, and it's for offshore audits. Basically, we can't get access to the platform, so we're using them for offshore audits for cybersecurity. Actually, it's a cybersecurity audit that we're doing offsite, offshore. So, but again, that can be used in any site. We can issue these headsets to a client either permanently or for a period of time so that they can utilise it as and when they require it.
Okay. And there's also another question in the chat from Graham Wallace. He's asking, what are you typically measuring? PLC stoppages or metrics that are in and out of targets, OEE, etc.?
Mostly PLC breakdowns at this stage, or alarms, specific alarms, usually crucial alarms to a plant. OEE less so. We do have a few OEE systems out there, but none of them at the moment are required for remote support. Okay,
thank you.
Zupash, can we come off sharing screen, do you think? Is that possible? So the panel, I don't know if that works on this platform. You've got Teams presenter, I think, have you?
Sorry, we've just got another slide up for the panel discussion, really. I don't know if that's okay. No problem.
Perfect. That's it. We're all bigger now. People can see right into the whites of their eyes. Thank you, Brian and Graham. I've actually got a question. Maybe Mark and Jamie might want to comment. Often when these things happen, fine-tuning of the brief could be an issue to get that right. So what would be the experience in making sure that what you get is what you think you get, and how do you go through that process?
Jamie, you want to go first this time?
Yeah, I think in terms of the brief, it's making sure that we have the full requirements and multiple iterations of requirements gathering from the business, and our experience that works better, and also focusing on minimum viable product, and making sure that we get a core set of requirements, and then we can implement that into the business, and then look at further iterations to enhance the solution for the business, but not trying to. The business typically like it, all of it, and now, if you like. So I think that's quite common. But no, typically a lot of discussions we have with the key stakeholders to make sure that the initial set of requirements are very targeted and making sure we hit those fundamental functions and features of the solution.
Yeah. Again, I'd agree with Jamie there. I think keeping whoever is involved in the initial chat focused. I think when we start to talk about the possibilities of technology and what it possibly can do, a lot of my user base with their eyes light up and they get really, oh right, okay, we can go, and they go off in tangents. Keeping them really focused on their core set of capabilities that we know we will deliver in version 1 or iteration 1 is key for us. And then it's a conversation. It's about Bridgeall coming in and helping us in a situation, delivering that, us looking at it, testing and providing feedback, and then taking the conversation forward. It's not a big bang approach, as it were. It's not going to happen day one. Everything's going to be brilliant on day one. It's going to be a progress forward.
Thank you. I suppose from Elite and Bridgeall's side, without upsetting clients, but are clients getting more intelligent? Do they understand more as we kind of expose people to the kind of digital solutions that are out there? Is that a trend that you're seeing? Brian or Graham, whoever's first. Graham, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll come in that. So yeah, I think they are. I think as as Jamie and Mark were saying, there has been a tendency in the past to try and, particularly from the business, to try and say, right, we want absolutely everything, right now. And I think we're starting to see that shift now, that people are more aware of this kind of minimum viable product, and this kind of iterative approach does work for them. So take the kind of minimum set of what you need, build it, particularly where we're talking about these kind of process driven and automating processes. It's key just to take that, the minimum you need to work, get that going, test the process. It's cheaper to do that. It's easier to do that. It's easier from a business point of view as well. And then start to add all the kind of the bells and whistles and all the other bits on top of it as well. I think that shift is definitely happening, where we're seeing customers come to us with that approach, as opposed to us having to kind of try and drive them down that approach instead.
Thank you. Ryan?
Yes, I would agree, absolutely. I think clients now are taking more of a vested interest in what's in the plan and what they need to do to get themselves running. And we find, as I say, we've got quite a lot of support contracts in place. Find that the first phase is them looking at it themselves, and every call we get now is a genuine call. So the interest in it, previously I'd say maybe 15 years ago, it was a case of, oh, it's a PLC or it's a black box, we really don't know what's happening in there, phone the guy. Whereas that's not happening now. All of our clients have a level of skill sets which is really very good, but it's just unfortunate some of the systems are quite complex, and unless you're using it every day, it becomes difficult to keep on top of that. So that's where our support comes in. It's the sort of higher level, if you like, because we are doing it day to day. We are perceived as being the experts. So, but I think generally speaking, clients are much more aware and want to become much more aware and much more self-sufficient.
Brilliant. If people want to ask questions, then I think in Teams you've got a hand function, so feel free to pop that up as well as drop them into the chat room. Mark and Grant, and then I guess for the other guys, talent and skills I think is a big issue that we talk about regularly in the network, and I'm just wondering whether that makes a choice of partner and supplier quite interesting. Do you expect, well, Bill at Elite and Stephen at Bridgeall to hire the best because you're now expecting your suppliers to come in with a lot of the talent to support you guys in the future? And of course, you guys have to think about that yourselves. So I'd be kind of interested in your view about the talent and whether there are shortages and how you overcome that with suppliers.
Yeah, well, from a White & Mackay point of view, a lot of people look at White & Mackay being this big, large corporate. I think when compared with the likes of Jamie and maybe Edrington and Diageo, we're actually relatively small. Everything now, what I'm finding now is that almost every project or any innovation within the business now has an IT element. And when you have a team of 5 people that report to me, and IT, looking after over 400, over 600 staff worldwide, it's a lot to ask of your internal staff, team. So therefore, selecting key partners is absolutely fundamental, Joe. And them being able to deliver a professional product which delivers obviously what you require, but is also putting your cybersecurity hat on, secure, reliable, and available. The onus is entirely on the partner to make sure that they've got really good staff and that are up to the task, as it were. So yeah, completely reliant on our key strategic partnerships.
Thank you, Mark. Jamie?
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. I think from a kind of talent point of view, we've, similar to yourself, Mark, I mean, I've got 3 guys now reporting to me and handling everything digital workplace and automation for 3,000 globally. So it's a real challenge, and I think we've implemented things like a digital native network where we have key users around the business that can maybe form that first level support. But if we look at the solution side of things, we're dependent on the likes of the guys at Bridgeall to come in and assist, because our backlog is, like you were saying, every area of the business now has got a touch point to, or multiple touch points to technology. So we have to be able to deal with the increased demand of solutions and apps that basically are going to make our business more efficient, make our people more efficient, and that's where we really are relying on the expertise with the likes of Bridgeall coming in and understanding the problem. They understand our business. And I think that is really key, and that's where I think is we've got great value from Bridgeall in terms of actually coming in, understanding your business, and being able to put in the right solution and work closely with the guys, and also that kind of knowledge management, that knowledge transfer of the system. So we're not dependent on oh, that's not working, we need to submit a ticket to Bridgeall. We can pick up the basic support. So, but we know that the Bridgeall's there if we need them. So I think that's from a technology progression and a talent progression point of view, it's really key.
That was good, thank you. I mean, that's about sharing the innovation challenge. I think other people cynically say it's about passing the risk, but I think you both described mostly sharing the innovation. I suppose quickly from Brian and Graham, if you've got any comment on that, do you see the challenge for talent and you guys having, I guess, foresight into the future and making sure that you guys are ready to support the clients that you've got here and the industry as a whole? I can see Bill in the background, he's probably worrying about that every moment of the day. So
yeah, you're right, Joe. It's an ongoing battle, and there's definitely a lack of talent coming through. It was interesting what some of the guys said about the understanding the business. That is a crucial part of what we do as well. We have to understand the process and the importance of the processes as well. That's really vital. But in terms of talent, yeah, it's difficult to get the right staff, and then of course you've got to make sure you keep them, and everyone's after them. So it's a constant battle. But I'm glad to say we've done remarkably well in this arena. We do a lot of in-house testing. We have in-house training matrices to make sure the lads are level is at the right level for our clients, and spend a lot of time trying to get familiar with all of our clients' processes as well as they are.
I think I would say the same as Brian. The market is competitive and it's hard to get staff. It's hard to kind of attract good staff and to keep them as well. What we found has worked quite well is we have been in previous years and this year as well looking to take on some graduates, and we usually find that the graduates are actually we're able to kind of take them on, kind of shape them into the way that we want them to work, and we usually get some really good kind of graduates through the door and kind of grow the talent that way. Obviously in association with other strategies of, either replacing key people or, getting key individuals in the door. But it's a good part of the mix, and that tends to help, keep some of the talent that we need.
Thank you. There's a question for Mark and Jamie, and then another one, I guess, that's going to be for you, Graham. But a question from Ryan saying, how do you keep up to date with the latest technology? Mark?
It's a very good question. We certainly with the Microsoft stuff, I'll be honest, I mean, we struggle a wee bit because, we get very, in some areas we get very limited notice of these changes coming to the platform, and Microsoft like to change things regularly and try and improve platforms, especially Teams. And before you know it, the sharing tray's changed, or the way that you present's changed, and that is a constant. It is a constant battle of trying to, with the digital workplace team, keeping up to date with those, and keeping a very close eye on the roadmap from Microsoft especially, and making sure that that we keep effectively the business communicating and collaborating using these tools. So we try and get ahead of these changes coming. We then put them through that digital native network that I was talking about earlier on to try and communicate that out. And any major changes, we then bolster that with an email out to all users saying, here are the changes that are coming, or here's the latest innovations with the Microsoft platform. But yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that we've got to be on our toes. They like to keep us on our toes.
Mark?
Yeah, just same as Jamie. We unfortunately signed up in a career in IT. We're not accountants. We don't get a degree and then we get maybe one variation a year from HMRC. It is constant. Sometimes you come in on a Tuesday morning. Microsoft have thrown out patches the night before or updates, and it can be a bit problematic, let's say. But it is what it is. We have a number of partners again, training providers that we use. But I think really key for me and my team is that again, coming back to that small team sort of mentality, I need my guys just to really be proactive in that respect. They need to be self-starters. They need to have the right attitude towards training and keeping their own professional development ongoing. Because ultimately then it delivers a better product to our users and the people we work with. But yeah, it's like kicking water up a hill, Joe. That's what it's like. That's the analogy I'll use.
And you also justified the existence of myself and my team at Seed to make sure that the peer-to-peer best practice happens, because not all changes are good, of course. It's good to find out from your peers which ones worked and what the shortcuts are, so that's great. Graham, I think there's a question for you about out-of-the-box connectors for Power Platform. You can probably see that in the chat, so I'm not even going to read it. I'm going to let you respond. You're the technical expert.
Yeah, no, I saw that one. So yeah, there's a number of out-of-the-box connectors, as I mentioned. Just to the systems that you would expect. Lots of Microsoft systems, lots of third-party systems. If there aren't connectors, there's the ability for ourselves, for example, to be able to create and publish different connectors to different systems if that's required. But typically what we would do is, if we were building a solution for our customers, we'd start off with the API or the Azure connector, or we would look to build a bit of middleware that we could then call, so that we could actually call back into the system as well. So if it's not on the list, it doesn't mean that we can't connect with it. It just means that we need to do a wee bit of extra work to get there.
Thank you. We maybe touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'm interested in the transition to new processes and technology. I mean, classically, you guys are in fast-moving goods. They're going quick. Shutting down the line is not something that management usually like. So I'm just wondering what experiences you maybe had at White Mackay and Edrington about that kind of transition when you've gone for a major implementation. How do you do it? How do you get everybody on board inside, so you don't get the accountants, you mentioned them, Mark, throwing things at you because you've missed a monthly number because you can't get there?
Again, it's a difficult one, Joe, because ultimately, the product going out the door is the metric that the business generally, it's the ultimate metric. Let's be honest. That's what it is. So yeah, I think engagement within the business across the piece. We're doing an ERP upgrade at the moment, for instance, and that has, you know, every touch point in the business, from the guys with, you know, on the forklift trucks to the accountants at the far end of analysing what's happening. Everyone has to be involved. So, you know, getting that level of engagement is always difficult. And again, it is what it is you need to do it. The business appreciates it, you need to do it, but you just need to try and work closely with key stakeholders around about the business to get that buy-in. It's never easy, but there's no golden bullet to it either. There's not a simple, this is, you know, the way to approach it. It's a struggle. That's all I can say on that one.
No, it's a bit of a battle, and I think you know, I echo that around the engagement. For us, I think it's engagement early. You know, getting the team and the key people involved in, you know, the solution or the change or whatever you are implementing. Get them their input early, so that you can, you know, both for two reasons. One, you can then understand exactly what the change is going to be, the consequences, the knock on, any downtime and things like that, and then you can schedule it. You don't want to find out about that stuff last minute. But also, you know, I find that if we're involving users early in a process, you know, and involving them in the design, then we typically see that the adoption of that system or that solution is a lot greater, is a lot more involved, and people got skin in the game, as they say, to say, you know, I help, you know, form that or build that or whatever. So, you know, with working with Bridgeall, we bring you know, them in, and we have calls collaboratively with the business as well, because we're all at the team, we're all here to deliver at the end of the day. So, you know, but the engagement is key. But yeah, that, like you're saying, Mark, there's no kind of magic formula or anything to it. It's just, it's a struggle. But you know, and I think that, you know, it refines all the time, and we improve it all the time. And I think with the pandemic, it's even more difficult, because, you know, from a plant that we are very typically paper-based and very manual, you know, asking the guys in the shop floor to attend team meetings and things can be a bit, you know, that's an additional change in things, and a way of working that we've had to adjust. But, you know, typically we just have everyone in a room and away we go. But you know, that transition, moving it onto teams and things, it's just another a friction point that we've had to deal with. But hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. There's a question from Scott. I think we're touching the cultural issues here now, but Scott was basically asking, in taking a project forward, who do you generally find are the most supportive of it at the customer and drives it, and who tends to need the most persuasion or convincing of the benefits? Maybe we'll ask Brian and Graham to pick up on that, and then move to the other panelists.
Sure. So I think, you know, as Jamie says, you know, now we're trying to involve as much as we can, you know, the business early on, and get that kind of cross section of people, so they have that kind of vested interest in pushing the project forward. What we tend to kind of almost like mandate, if you like, is that we have what we would call a product owner. So we've got somebody who represents the needs of the business, if you like, back to us, so that we've got that point of contact, so that when we're developing or we're building the system, we can get, you know, those quick answers in terms of, you know, what do you want to do in this situation, or how should this part work, or whatever, and get that kind of level of detail. I think having that, you know, building in that more kind of collaborative way, which seems to be becoming more of the norm now, is having that huge benefit of helping the business to be kind of vested in what it is they're doing. So, you know, no longer is it somebody just coming to say, I want to build this system, and then it's kind of getting forced upon, you know, the rest of the team and the rest of the stakeholders. You know, you've got a cross section of stakeholders. They're all aware of it. They're aware of what they need, and they are vested in, you know, trying to get this project to work, and they understand the benefits that they're going to get out of that as well. So I think from that point of view, it makes our job a lot easier, because we're getting the kind of buy-in, and we don't really see that kind of, you know, there's not as much kind of persuasion and convincing needed, because that work's already been done up front. So,
Ryan.
Yeah, I would echo most of what Graham just said. I think the type of work we do, we strongly encourage, and and the milestones that we have, the client to come and see what we're doing, what we're developing. So there are milestones set out there where there's constant interface with the client, and they can physically see a SCADA system or the software, how it's going to control. And as I said earlier, we use a simulation system so we can actually show them in real time how it works. So they're quite keen to come and see that. So it affects so many people, whether it be production people, maintenance people, engineering, operators. So usually with the system, we'll bring in the operators as well and get them to believe it's their system and they buy into that. And that's a really crucial part of it as well. So I think by sharing the knowledge, I think what Graham said is right. The persuasion's already been done, but when the project's going forward, it's bringing in the right departments, the right people at the right time and getting their buy-in to what you're producing. And the comments you usually get is, oh, that's the wrong shade of brown or something like that, something daft like that. And that's fine. That's exactly what people want. That's what, oh, I don't really like that. We had one client who wanted, believe it or not, red for start, green for stop. And in one country, that's what they do. So, okay, we would never have guessed that till they turned up on our site. But it's things like that. It's just making sure the client gets what they want and they buy in, and there's a total buy-in all the way through. But as I say, we encourage it with the milestones that we have and have set times when we invite people in to see the system as it's been developed.
Okay, I suppose I'm conscious of time, but in true question time style, quickly around the panel, one from each of you. If you had a top tip to advise someone who's not embarked on the automation journey, if you like, what would you give them as their top tip?
I'll start if you want. Apart from company speak to elite, I would say take your time, step back, and look at all the options. Have a plan, and put building blocks in place for future, as well as I think some people jump in, and from my experience, a little bit too quickly and get excited by a particular new product that comes along and find out it disappears 2 or 3 years later. So I would suggest take a step back, talk to more than one company, talking about our competitors as well here, but talk to more than one company, get a balanced view of what you want to do going forward, and then come and talk to Elite after that.
I think, kind of similar to that, come and talk to us, even if you're not at the stage where you're ready to go, we can give you some initial advice as to things you need to do. Go away and have a think about the processes and what it is you're looking to automate, and think about the kind of knock-on effects that you've got. And the other thing is, try and start reasonably small. So try and start with something that's not necessarily simple, but probably going to get a decent amount of impact. But it's a reasonably small kind of contained one. Start with that project, and then before you move on to the others.
Mark, Jamie, your views, the one tip.
Yeah, I would say certainly dealing with the Microsoft platform. I think I would say I promised myself I wouldn't mention the G word, but the governance is something that is really hit us quite hard. I think it would have been good if we could address the governance and get that in place prior to doing all these apps and services and things, because Microsoft's new way of it is, here's a platform, go and create lots of stuff, and that makes me feel a wee bit uncomfortable, and I know many others in the IT community are a wee bit uncomfortable with that. So, we've worked with Bridgeall to set up good governance around the Power Platform, around who can create environments, who can create solutions, and etc. So I think setting up your governance, having a look at your environment, making sure that's ready and a good foundation for you to start that automation journey would be my tip.
Brilliant. Mark, your final tip.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a top tip, Joe, but what I would say is that for me, looking at automation generally, it's about finding the low-hanging fruit. That's what I would suggest. It's coming back to, I suppose, what Brian was saying about understanding the customer and whatnot. Understanding my customer as my users. So understanding their pain points, understanding what they're doing 100 times a day, which potentially we could look at the solution and just strip it right out. The platform and the solutions that Microsoft are giving us now, I hate to say it, but it's the thin end of the wedge for the replacement of people. And it is, if you've got someone stamping a bit of paper 150 times a day, that job potentially is going to be replaced by what Microsoft are bringing out. The you know, the RPA stuff that Graham mentioned, he spoke to me about a week and a half ago about it, and I thought, I have an ERP system which is a bit flaky at the best of the time, and you know, that could potentially take, you know, a 15-20 step procedure that a person's doing and do away with it. So it's the thin end of the wedge, but what, yeah, top tip, look at the low-hanging fruit, look at what you can do quickly and make some, you know, good early wins. Get early wins in, get people bought in, and you're off and running.
Zupash, I'm conscious of time, so is there anything I'm missing in the background, or do you want someone at your end to close off? Or
yeah, no, that's everything. I think just wanted to say a big thank you to the attendees for joining today, and to the panelists for being part of this. So thanks very much. It's been a very informative presentation. Just a quick note, I know some people have probably dropped off, they might have had other meetings and things like that, so apologies, but we will send up a follow-up with slides and the recording of the session as well, and some of the contact details of the panelists if you need to get in touch, or if you know any questions later on that you want to ask. So yeah, just rounding up really, so thank you very much everybody. Yeah, and I'll probably head off then. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Bye. Bye.